Again, my name is Pastor Wade. I like to walk around a lot. I hope that's not disconcerting. Um, but we are going through, and again, so those of you who were here last week, my goal here is to motivate you to read your Bible more and to hopefully get a little bit better understanding. And what we've been doing is, let me just digress. I was candidating in a church in Ohio before we moved here. And I enjoyed it, but it seemed like every Sunday was just, I love presenting, I love talking, and it was like pulling teeth to get something going. And I just couldn't. And that was the church that they were going to vote on Sunday whether to bring me in, and on Saturday I said, I'm moving to Tennessee, sorry. God told me. But it was so hard. And with this series, and since I've been here presenting, it's been fun. Just the studying, just like Pastor Daryl's been talking about. I just get in there and it's like, man, this is fun. I got it. So anyway, as I started going through this, originally I wasn't going to do a study. I was just going to kind of hit some of the highlights of the books. But I got so wrapped up and so involved and wrapped up in study of Mark, I thought, you know what? I'll just keep going. So I'm going to keep going for a while. So we'll just go on with that. All right. So we're going to recap here real quick. Mark was a teenager, not a disciple when Jesus was on earth. He wrote the book approximately 20 years after the resurrection. He was writing to the Christians in Rome. Tradition shows he's dead at Rome. Mark has a lot of action to show that Jesus was different from their gods. Jesus is the one true Son of God. And we finished last week, Mark retelling of Jesus choosing the 12 disciples. And then we talked about how important the family was. And we talked a little bit about being a host, those type of things. And then, we went through the different versions and talked about how people were saying Jesus was out of his mind. And some were deranged and things like that. So we got a few more things to go. I didn't quite finish chapter 3. So what we're going to be doing is, if you were kind of following along in the book, you'd see that the scribes then accused Jesus of being controlled by evil spirits. Okay? And then Jesus called them over and he began to speak in parables to them. Now, anyway, here's some of the highlights that he did. How can Satan drive out Satan? How can a kingdom divided against itself stand? How can a house divided against itself stand? How can you enter a strong man's home without tying him up first, right? So he's giving him these things like, I'm not sure they're getting it, but he's telling them about that. Then he finishes with this, and I thought I'd kind of go off on a sidelight because I've heard this several times. And Jesus says, but whoever blasphemes against the Holy Spirit will never be forgiven. They are guilty of an eternal sin. And when I read that, I'm like, oh my gosh, have I committed an eternal sin? Am I going to die and go to heaven? Nothing I can do? It's kind of scary. So I wanted to go into this here a little bit more. No, this is a Greek word, blasphemio, which is one of those words where, it's kind of changed meanings over time. And what Jesus is specifically speaking about here is when you attribute the work of God or the Holy Spirit to the devil. Okay, in other words, just what these religious people did, right? Jesus did a miracle and they said, aha, you're of the devil. That's blasphemy, right? Because the work of God attributing, and just like, and I would never say this, but if I said something like, my life has been great because of the devil, right? No, it hasn't. My life has been great because of the work of the Holy Spirit in my life, right? That's the kind of thing that we're talking about. So, and again, you watch these TV shows and stuff, and you hear this thing, or you may be talking to a non-Christian, they'll throw out the word, oh, you're blaspheming, aren't you? It's like, no. Look, don't pay attention to the Hollywood types. Don't get mixed up in this. God loves you. You are forgiven. Okay? So just kind of wanted to highlight that a little bit. So we're going to go ahead and wrap up with chapter 3 with Jesus talking about family. Okay? And they were talking around like, they said, oh, your mother and your brother are here. And he says, well, who are my mother and brother? And then he looked at those sitting around the circle and he said, here are my mother and my brothers. Whoever does God's will is my brother and sister and mother. And this is where I wanted to talk about family for a second, okay? And I really appreciate Rex talking in Sunday school and preaching, because he talks a lot about his home life when he was younger. And I didn't have it nearly that bad, but, you know, again, I was raised with a non-Christian father. And were you raised in a Christian home in a Christian environment? And that's great if you did. I know a lot of people who were, and they're much more well-adjusted than I am. Okay, some of us were the first or the only ones who became Christians, and we kind of, you know, I like to talk about my brother. I love my brother. He's passed on. He was very, very good at what we call cutting, you know, insulting people funny. I mean, he would insult his wife, and she would be laughing, rolling on the floor, but then tears would come to her eyes because he was so mean to her, right? And I picked this up. And in case you guys don't know, I got married when I was 17, okay? Coming up on 47 years, next, the 14th, whatever day that is, Monday. Any rate, I got married when I was 17, and I was doing what I saw my relatives do, right, in a family, right? In other words, I hate to talk about, but, you know, they say most people who are abused as a child are abusers as they become adults because they do what their family did, right? Well, I was not as good as my brother, but I was getting to the point where, you know, I could insult my wife and make it was funny and laugh. And then I actually got into a Sunday school class, and we started talking about that. And they said, you know, yeah, you may make them laugh, but are you really helping them by insulting them? Are you really, you know, making them feel good? Okay, yeah, it's funny, ha ha ha, but you've just insulted your wife. And it just like, you know, one of those light bulbs going off or something, you know, oh, it's like, don't do that. So I have stopped. And when I was working, it was very easy because I was working around with a bunch of kids, and they all like to, you know, bust each other, you know, say that, you know, insult and be funny, and I couldn't be part of that. And tell them, no, I can't do that, you know. And if I wasn't careful, I would find myself slipping back. So I had to watch that. Anyway, so that's why I say when we went against the grain of the lifestyle of our relatives. Now, when I first got saved, some of our zeal, you know, you get that initial, oh, man, I want to share my life. I want to share what I found out about Christ. And some people understood that as you were either criticizing or trying to get them to buy in, you know. And again, like selling Avon, you know, hey, come into this pyramid scheme. By the way, if anybody sells Avon, please don't take that as a. I guess I should have said, what's that multi-marketing? Isn't it? Amway, that's it, yeah. Okay, and again, if you sell Amway, I'm not, you know, I'm just saying that's the way that I felt a lot of people were thinking when I tried to talk to them about, hey, I became a Christian. And of course, you've been accused of a hypocrite. And I will tell you, you know, that was what a lot of it is, because all of a sudden I was smoking, I was swearing, you know, it used to be, and I wasn't this terrible, terrible person. You know, I wasn't like a biker guy or anything, but I just, you know, I was bad enough. And then all of a sudden I started changing my life. And they're like, oh, man, you're a hypocrite. You used to swear all the time. You know, I'd say, hey, you know, don't swear on me. You know, I don't mind it. I do mind it. It kind of grates on me, you know, please don't. And they're like, what a hypocrite. You know, you used to swear all that. Yeah, okay, I got where you see that. I'm trying to change my life around for the better. And then, of course, I had some well-meaning actions as a young Christian. I remember one time, and I'm not proud of this at all, I got into an argument with a Catholic in front of a bunch of non-believers at school about the Pope. Right? And that is a stupid thing to argue. I'm sorry, I shouldn't say stupid. You know, it's just, why we don't argue about that? You know, I mean, and what kind of witness was I giving to that? Now, again, I was well-meaning, and the lady that I was arguing with was well-meaning, but we really you know, I mean, I still think of that to this day, saying, what do those people think about? You know, the two Christians in the class, and we start arguing. It's like, oh, man. Okay. And then, of course, My first Wednesday night, my father calls me up. Like I said, my father wasn't Christian. And he had many opportunities, and he turned them all down. And I said, well, Dad, I got to go because we're going to go to church. He said, what? Why you're what? I said, well, I've turned my life over to God. Are you crazy? Why do you hate gay people? What? Again, young Christian, I didn't know how to answer him. I was like, and this was about the time when the AIDS thing was coming around, and, it was just like, you're a bigot, you hate gay people. No, I don't hate gay people. You do. Just look at all these leaders who talk bad about gay. And I was like, again, I didn't know how to answer him. Now, if I'd be accused of that, I have a little bit more maturity. I'd know how to answer it. But then, oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I was upset at it too, buddy. Okay. And it's okay. I love the sound. Over the years, I can't say I won my friends and family over. Most, I got to admit, I didn't. I didn't have this great conversion and get them all. But what I did get a chance to do is show them love. And the ones that I became that were Christians or became Christians, we came much more close. And remember last week I showed you the picture of me. I was showing you for a different reason. But this is my brother and my sister, okay? And again, we're going back to where Jesus says, whoever loves, my brother and my sister, whoever loves me loves my brother and my sister. Anyway, I got the privilege of baptizing my brother, my oldest brother, and my sister in the Jordan River in Israel. It was an awesome experience, okay? And then whoever does God's will is my brother and sister and mother. And what I wanted to show you here is these are some friends that we went over to Israel with. They went to our church. And these are some people. There's me talking. And these were people that we went on the bus trip for a week. And some of them I still talk to because they're my brothers and my sisters. So if you ever get a chance to go to Israel, come and talk to me. I've got so many good stories about it. And you would love it if you haven't been. Has anybody been to Israel? My wife and I have been twice. And we want to go back. Okay? That's how much we loved it. Every day is a life-changing experience. Every day. Life-changing experience. Okay, so let's go on to chapter 4. So now, you got to realize, too, a lot of times this throws people because we're used to reading stuff in a chronological order. Okay, now especially in like Matthew, he does a lot of this where he talks here and then he goes there and he goes back. So don't get kind of caught up thinking, oh, well, he went from A to B. It's not A to B to C to D to E. A lot of times it's A to E, B, D, back to A. So you got to kind of, that's why as you're reading the Bible, you really got to kind of study where they're talking about, because sometimes they're not telling the story chronologically, okay? So he's talking to larger crowds with disciples in attendance, okay? So Jesus starts out with the parable of the 4 seeds and then explains it to his disciples. So he goes and tells the parable of the four seeds to his disciples, or to the crowds, and then he goes over to the disciples because they're like, what are you talking about, dude? He's like, okay, here's what I mean by this, okay? And you'll find that he did that a lot. He only explained it to his disciples. So you're asking yourself, why a parable? Okay, well, first thing, what is a parable? Webster defines it as a short, allegorical story designed to illustrate some moral truth, right? So, we kind of know. Yeah, got it. And now, we talked briefly about the various type of people. Remember we talked about who hung around with Jesus? And there were some people who wanted to listen, some people who wanted to see him do miracles. There were some people who were spies, right? So one of the reasons he spoke in parables is they require the listener to truly listen, okay? And think, to grasp the kernel, the idea, the basic idea. And so those who are really interested would be saying, hey, what do you mean by that? That's why he got the disciples aside. And they're like, what is he talking about? Right? Casual listeners or people with a hidden agenda would probably be just confused and think, this guy is going off, Parables are easy to picture, right? They usually point to a deeper meaning. And it conveys the point across the ages. Now I'm going to kind of go here, but I want you guys to just think about this for a second. The Bible is written sometimes up to 5,000 years ago. Okay? In the case of Jesus, it was 2,000 years ago, right? And yet it still gives us lessons, instructions that are relevant today. Okay? Now that's tough to do if you think about it. When you think about history, which I love, I don't know why, but when you think about all the periods of time, and so here is my analogy basically of it is, imagine if all of a sudden you said, I've got to write a letter to someone 2,000 years from now. Okay? Now think about that. How would you write a letter to someone 2,000 years ago, or 2,000 years from now, right? Think of that. Matter of fact, I was watching this guy today on a YouTube video, and he had, those drone motors with four propellers, and they fly through the air and stuff. Well, this guy had like about 8 propellers, and he strapped on, and he flew. And you know what immediately I thought of? You guys wouldn't know. Maybe some of you wouldn't know either. But I remember when I was a kid reading the Dick Tracy comics, okay, back in the 40s and 50s. And what did he have? He had a watch that he could get pictures on and talk to his bosses and get information. And this was like super science fiction, right? I just did that today. I talked on my, I answered my smartphone over my Apple Watch, right? I can see pictures of there's pictures of my wife and stuff. We can do video over my Apple Watch. So, and then the other thing that Dick Tracy did was he would hop into the, I forget what they call them, but this, I think they call it like a hover glider or a glider or something. But he would hop in this thing. It was a one-person, again, science fiction thing, but it was a one-person airplane, if you will. But he would stand in it, and then they would fly to the scene of the crime. And I was like, man, this all of a sudden this just became, it's science fact. It's not science fiction anymore. Everything that was in Dick Tracy is now science fact. So anyway, imagine now, if you had to write to people 2,000 years from now, and you said, I got on my Apple Watch, and they're going to go, what? What's an Apple? I mean, think about it. We don't know how the future is going to go. I mean, what was, I don't know if it was Einstein, but someone said, I don't know how World War III is going to be fought, but I know how World War IV is going to be fought, and that's with sticks and stones, okay? Meaning World War III is going to be so bad that we're not going to have the technology. So anyway, who knows, right? And what's the standard? Are we even going to have electricity? Okay, maybe not, okay? And this is why the parables are almost timeless, right? In other words, think of what Jesus is talking about. He's talking about planting seeds, the cycles, a good man, a bad man, a guy who employs people, these type of things. So that's why parables are so are a good way for him to communicate his message. All right. Now also remember, we talked about those people following Jesus as he was preaching, and some were spies for the religious leaders. Remember we talked about that? Those leaders who, Sadducees, Pharisees, Herodians, teachers of the law, who all hated each other but hated Jesus more. Okay? Now, this is where, I'm sorry, I've got to apologize. I've got this weird sense of humor and this weird imagination. But I am just imagining, if we're talking about the parable that Mark talked about. So I'm imagining like the Sadducees and the Pharisees and the Herodians. So they're all gathered and say, okay, guy, go spy on him. Because we want to catch him in the act, and we want to get the Romans to kill him and show that he's doing something, because we hate this guy, right? So go spy on him and report back to what he says. So the guy says, oh, okay. So it goes over, and he listens to the parable. Okay? And he kind of comes back. And so they're all sitting around, right? And they're all waiting. Okay, now, what did he say that we can throw him away for, that we can kill him for? And he says, okay, well, first he talked about a farmer. A farmer who's going to get with other farmers, and they're going to overthrow Rome, so we can go throw him in prison, right? It's like, yeah, no. It's a farmer who's planting his field, and he's sowing seed. And okay. So it's a farmer who's oppressing his people and beating them and whipping them and forcing them to work in the field, right? He's like, no. He's basically talking about putting seeds in the rocky places and then putting seeds in the good places, and how they won't grow well in the rocky place. That's it? He talked about that. Well, did he talk about anything else? Well, yeah. He talked about mustard and mustard seeds. Again, that's it. I mean, mustard, what do we care about? Why do we hate this guy again? Well, he says we don't understand him. It's like, anyway, so that's as I see these things in my mind, how the parables have such a deeper meaning, but they didn't give the teachers of the law that opportunity or that reason to drag him before the Romans, because his job wasn't finished yet. Okay, so chapter 4 ends with Jesus taking a short boat trip on the Sea of Galilee, and what they said was, we're going to go to the other side. Now remember, they had to take several boats, right? Because I showed you that picture of the Jesus boat last week, and you can't put like 20 people in there. You can put 4 or 5 maybe, that kind of thing. So, just a side note about the Sea of Galilee, all right? 680 feet below the surface. Okay, that is the lowest freshwater lake. Dead Sea, which is not freshwater, is lower. By the way, if you ever get a chance to swim in the Dead Sea, it is weird. Okay, I mean, if you're standing like this, you cannot put your head above water. You can't. You cannot. You can jump up all you want, and you get to about to here, and that's about it. You cannot, because it's got so much water in there. If you get on your back, it's almost impossible to get back up. You got to throw your legs underneath you, and it's just weird. Okay, but anyway, so it's the surrounding mountains on the east side are 2,000 feet high. All right, and that's where the cool, dry air is located. The lake is very shallow. All right, and that matters because the shallow lakes don't absorb the energy. So what happens is the cool, dry air from the mountains mixes with that low, moist air, and it becomes very violent, right? And that results, the temperature, if you were into meteorology, that high pressure and the low pressure coming together causes this violent winds and stuff. And because the sea is so shallow, all that energy goes into the waves, right? It doesn't go underneath because it's so shallow. So it's pretty bad. Now, what I wanted to do on this picture was show you, this is the Sea of Galilee, and you can see up here, this is what kind of the Golan Heights, okay? That's kind of it, but that's the 2,000 feet and the that big, and there you can see the warm, moist air, right? The fog, that warm, moist air down there, and it mixes with the other. Just thought I'd show you a picture. And then, of course, also remember that the squall, these disciples were fishermen on the Sea of Galilee. So if it caused them to panic, it had to be pretty bad, right? And again, when the Bible says the disciples were terrified, okay, so yeah, it's a bad squall coming up. But did they underestimate Jesus? That maybe he didn't have the power to do this, right? But don't judge him too harshly, because how many times have we underestimated Jesus and his ability to handle crisis in our lives? Okay. So chapter 5, they went to the Gerasenes region. This is around the Golan Heights. So where we were at, let me get up here. Where we were at, we were over in this area. We take a picture up here. So this kind of, the whole area is the Golan Heights, right? So they went to the other side. They came over here. And, okay. I'll forewarn you. This is where they talk about the possessed man, okay? And as you can read, I am by nature a chicken. And those things scare me. I don't like to watch scary movies. I am a chicken, okay? They scare me. I don't know why demon possession occurs. I don't want to know, okay? But I know that evil spirits can use the human body to destroy the relationship with God and others, okay? Evil spirits still exist. They can be more subtle today than 2 centuries ago, but they can and will destroy, and they are powerful. But as you think of that, remember, Jesus is much, much more powerful. But those evil spirits are dangerous, okay? I look to the Old and New Testament when we talk about demonic things, and you can see in Deuteronomy, avoid any curiosity or involvement in demonic activity. James resists the devil and his influences, and he will flee from us. We've been talking in our Sunday school class about battlefield of the mind. That's where a lot of times where Satan or evil spirits like to attack, okay? So, Jesus and his disciples get off the boat, they go onto land, and there is a man who's not talked to anybody for a long time. They've tried to, get him to help him, but he wouldn't take it, right? And the first thing he does is he goes up to Jesus and screams, "What do you want with me?" And of course, in my mind, it's like, "What do you want with me?" And he was scared. He was defensive. You could see hate in his voice, rebelliousness. Now, think about society today and when we talk about Jesus. What does society scream today about God, about the church, about Christian values? Think of that. And if you're like me, it's getting harder and harder to watch TV shows. I keep turning off these TV shows. I mean, they might be good acting and a good storyline, but it's like, oh my gosh, these people are preaching to me. Okay? If you'll notice, I love trying to figure out the whodunits, beforehand. And Jeanette says, "Man, you're really good at this." And I said, "Well, I have a couple of basic things I think about when I'm watching a TV show. One, if there's a guest star, right? A really popular guest star on a TV series, he or she is probably the one who did it because they want to come in, they want to act evil, or whatever, and then, so they're usually the one who did it. The other one is, if it's someone who quotes the Bible, right? Someone who quotes the Bible, they're almost always the guilty party. They're the pervert. They're the killer. They're the one who did it. It's because once they quote the Bible, we know that they're off the rocker, right? That's what the TV shows and the movies keep showing us. You don't believe me? Go grab a Stephen King book or watch a Stephen King movie. 99% of the time, that is the truth. Okay, the other part, the one with the minute, okay. I don't know how much formal training Pastor Rex has, but I know Pastor Darrell has a doctorate, right? Most of the preachers I know have been doing it for a long time, are very wise, smart people. They've done a lot of counseling. They've done a lot of study and, on good values, good behavior, those type of things. I hate it when they get some minister up on there and someone asks him a question, right? And it'll be something silly like, "Well, why do you hate gay people?" And he'll say, "Well, it's against the Bible." He won't give them a good answer. He'll give them a crazy, "Well, it's against the Bible, so they're going to go out, die and go to hell." Wait, But then someone who is, I hope I'm explaining this where you get it, someone who has no formal training will walk up and say, "Yes, but doesn't the Bible say love one another?" And then that minister, who should be a guy with a doctorate and has counseled people all his life and had, discussed with people and shows love and those type of things, and he'll go, "Oh, I never thought of that." And it's like, come on, are you kidding me? It just drives me crazy. I don't know, maybe I'm overreacting, but I cannot watch these TV shows anymore because they're preaching to me more than they're giving me entertainment. And of course, values. Oh, your values are not our values, man. What's this new one? Non-binary. I'm not a male or a female. I'm non-binary. Okay. And then, of course, if we say, "Well, male, female, oh, how dare you, And then, of course, when we talk about, loving one another, respecting one another, this type of things, hate the sin, love the sinner, okay? Look, you want to see what happens when you don't have Christian values. And Portland is still on what? Their second year of nightly protests and people beating each other up. You know how many people have died in Portland? We don't know because the media won't report it. Yet we know how many people were on well, anyway, I don't want to get into politics. But Portland, Seattle, New York, right now, I mean, we went to New York a couple of times when we were in the 90s. We lived in Rome, New York, and a friend took it and said, come on, it's great. This was Giuliani, cleaned it up, right? We went there, loved it. Saw a show, had a great time. They say you can't do that anymore. There's feces, there's homeless people, there's, you know, because they won't prosecute, they let people out on bail. SFLA, okay. I was born in San Francisco. I'm scared to go back there. You know, the tent cities are taking over. The no bail. You know, so you arrest someone. Have you seen this one where the guys now are finding older people? A lot of times it's like a Chinese lady. I'm sorry, Oriental lady, and they'll knock them flat. And oh yeah, it's just, well, you know, that's one of those things. And what's even worse is, as this lady is being knocked flat, instead of helping, they're all doing this. You know, taking pictures of it and posting. Oh, I'm going to get rich. I'm going to post it on the internet. What kind of value is that? Oh my gosh. Okay, let me get off my soapbox. I'm sorry. Again, I could easily go on. Okay, my point here is, don't think that demon possession doesn't occur today. It's actually very, very prevalent in society. It's just hidden under a different name. Okay? A couple of interesting side notes. As Jesus asked this guy, okay, what's your name? Or he said, you know, my name is Legion. Okay, that means a bunch, right? Well, in the Roman army, Legion is the largest units of soldiers, typically 3,000 to 6,000 men. Now, the area that what they went to, let me see. Yeah, I'll have another photo later, or map. The area they went to, Gadara, in the Gerasene region, was mostly Gentiles, which explains the herd of pigs, right? Because pigs are unclean, right? So Jews wouldn't be, you don't eat pork if you're a Jew or a Muslim, okay? And remember now again this description of the photo I showed of the Sea of Galilee and how high that was, and that kind of explains why the pigs went down into the lake and died. Okay? Now, a couple of strange, interesting things happened after this man was released from demon possession and the town folks came over. So, Jesus healed this guy through the demon spirits into the pigs went into the lake, and then the guy's sitting there and he's like, oh wow, and then all of a sudden the townsfolk come in, okay, and they come and see him, and what do? First thing they did is they asked Jesus to leave. What? Well, they were mostly Gentile, he was a Jew. They feared his supernatural power, and he just destroyed their livelihood, right? They're Gentiles. They're raising pigs for food, to import, to export. I mean, you know, to eat. That's their livelihood. And he just destroyed a bunch of them. Then, now this was kind of bizarre too. Jesus told that guy to go and tell everyone what happened. Now, remember we talked last time? He kept saying to people, don't tell anyone, right? Don't tell anyone. You've been healed. Go to the priest, but don't tell anyone, right? So here's some reasons that I think so. Because the man had been unable to speak, telling people that Jesus wasn't your father's rabbi, right? This was a Gentile pagan area, so there weren't going to be any huge crowds that followed Jesus. And most important, it's okay, baby. Most important, that's probably what my wife is doing right now, so don't worry. Most important, Jesus was expanding his ministry to the non-Jews. I love that sound, by the way, okay? The worst, I'm going to tell you, do not apologize for that baby. If anybody says anything, I will go nuclear, okay? I was in a church where there were no kids. Everyone there was 50 years old. I was one of the young guys, and I'm an old guy, and I was one of the youngest ones. I love that sound, and we should too, because that is our future. The church is one generation away from being non-existent. We should not only love that, we should encourage that. And we should applaud every time she does it. Okay? It's a she, right? Oh, thank goodness. Oh, my wife is so going to kill me when I get home. Okay. The next thing I want to talk to you about is Decapolis. All right. Now that's kind of the region that they went into, right? This area here. This was known as Decapolis, and again, that's 10 cities, right? Deca, like decade. 10 cities, each had their own independent government, and they formed this alliance of Decapolis so they could trade and do that kind of stuff. The area was developed by Greek traders and immigrants who settled in the area. There were Jews there, okay? But also notice that Matthew mentions that many people from the Decapolis area followed Christ. What I wonder is, I wonder if this guy that Jesus healed started a ministry. Okay? I mean, not out of line, right? So, just a thought. Okay. Could this demon, I just said it there, sorry, contribute to the number of people? Something to think about. Okay. So now they decide, okay, let's go back. Okay, so they go back across the Sea of Galilee back to Capernaum when Jairus, one of the synagogue leaders, approached Jesus. Okay, so it says he was a synagogue leader. So what does that mean? Well, he was typically elected, but the Pharisees had to have their guy in there, right? I mean, you didn't get elected to this position if the Pharisees didn't like you, right? We talked about synagogue several times. Synagogue does not mean church, it means gathering place. So this could be a place of social gatherings, community gatherings, those type of things. Responsibilities would include scheduling, maintaining, carrying the facility, and he had close ties with the Pharisees. So because of that, he would have been pressured not to associate with Jesus. Remember, this group hated Jesus, right? So when Jesus comes out, Jairus bows before him, and that really means he was desperate, right? But he had heard of Jesus' healing, so he decided, and I totally get this, he wants to save his daughter, so he goes to Jesus. But a funny thing happened on the way to the house of Jairus. Okay, so again, I like to step back and think about what we just talked about. A popular elected official is desperate for help. And this large crowd gathers. And again, perhaps they'd heard of Jesus before. Maybe they knew about Jairus' daughter, that she was sick. And maybe it was some of the crowd that we talked about, the spies, people wanting to see miracles, those type of things. And Jesus heard Jairus' plea, so he starts heading for the house of Jairus. And of course, the crowd follows him, right? And the crowd gets large, and, again, think of this as like, bumping into each other and getting in the way and all this stuff. And, and all of a sudden he stops, right? In my mind, I've got, okay, this crowd of 50, 60 people, and everybody, mumble, mumble, mumble. And all of a sudden Jesus stops and goes, whoa, who touched my robe? And the disciples are like, what? They've been bumping into y'all, for the last 10 minutes. And the disciples were like, who touched your clothes? Well, a bunch of people touched your clothing. But then, this is what he said, as Jesus is looking around for who touched him, a woman with a bleeding disorder for 12 years falls at his feet, trembling, and admits she worked her way through the crowd and touched the robe, and immediately she was healed. Before Jesus said anything, she was healed. Okay? The bleeding disorder meant she was unclean, right? Like the lepers we talked about. So anyone who touches her or she touches becomes unclean as well. So because she was unclean for 12 years, she was a social outcast. And again, people would probably throw rocks at her because they didn't want her to be anywhere near them. And Jesus confirmed her healing. Daughter, your faith has healed you. Now, in my crazy mind, I'm like, what if the woman never admitted it, right? She was immediately healed. So she didn't have to say anything, right? But she did. I just, again, I can't prove it one way or the other, but what if she didn't say anything? What if she said, okay, well, I'm good. I'm going to go on over here. Would she have still been healed? I don't know. Just a question. Yeah. Have you ever fought the crowds to touch the robe of Jesus? This is one of those questions where I say, okay, think of what she did. This social outcast, okay. Imagine like, and I'm coming off the top of my head of this, so it's probably wrong, but just imagine like if there was a room full of a hospital, full of COVID people, right? Are you going to walk through there because Jesus told you to? Now, I wouldn't say walk through there, but if Jesus said, wait, you need to walk through there, would I have the fortitude to walk through that crowd? Again, now I would, because I'm vaccinated, right? There's no skin off my neck, right? But before this, again, think of June 2020 when we were all scared and I was doing the shopping and masked and I looked like the Pillsbury Doughboy. I had stuff all over me so I could go into CVS, right? So, have you ever fought the crowds to touch the robe of Jesus? And then I said, think of the Christians in the China or the Muslim countries. You know, when they go to church, they are literally taking their life in their hand. You know, I'm guilty. Please, I'm talking to me. Don't think I'm pointing fingers at anyone. I'm talking to me. How many times have I got up and said, oh, I'm so tired. Oh, my toe is aching. I don't want to go to church today. Or, you know, oh, it's Wednesday night. I don't want to go. I've had a rough day. And I think about those people who have to literally get rocks thrown at them, risk the police or the armies coming in to break down the door to stop them from worshiping. That's what it's like in the Muslim country. You don't believe me? Do Iraq, Christians having a service in Iraq, right? You'll see more than one, you'll see many, many videos, and you'll also read some headlines about the Christian church was destroyed. Somebody came in, shot them all. Okay? Have you ever walked through the crowd to touch the robe of Jesus? So Jesus was still speaking to the woman when some of the people who were at Jairus' home came and told him, she's gone, man. Don't bother the rabbi anymore. But Jesus stopped. Now this is awesome. Jesus heard this and said, what? Don't be afraid. Just believe. Just had goosebumps. I'm sorry. Okay. Tomorrow, tonight, on your way home, whatever you have to do, whatever's going on, don't be afraid. Just believe. Go on. So Jesus ordered the crowd. So again, this crowd was going with him, right? And he said, okay, time out. You guys hang here, all right? And he took Peter, James, and John. They went to the house of Jairus where there were mourners crying and wailing. Now, you have to know, in the Middle East, there are, and you've probably heard this because it's kind of funny and interesting, but when you see those people wailing and moaning, it's actually a sign of respect to have people moaning and just over the top, you know, crying and hysterical, and you're saying, what's wrong with it? Well, they're paid, okay? There's actually people who are paid professional mourners. That is their job. They go to a funeral and they cry and they weep and they throw themselves on the ground and they're saying they don't know the guy, right? But that's their job, okay? And think about this when you see a lot of these funeral processions when Palestinians are killed. Now, some of it's for the TV and stuff, but you know, like I said, that is not unusual, okay? So he said, all right, stop, you guys. She's not dead. She's asleep. And how did they respond? They laughed. Okay? So, after he ordered the crowd out, they get out of here, you guys. So, the mother and the father, Jesus went to the dead girl's body. He took her by the hand and spoke in Aramaic, Talitha cum, which basically means, get up, young lady. Have you ever had a teenager in bed? And it's like noon. You know what I'm saying? Get up, young lady. You know, there's stuff to do. I have no reason to believe this. It's just, in my mind, that's how he said it. You know, it's just like Jesus. Get up. Come on. You know, get up, young lady. Okay. And of course, the girl got up, walked around. So we've only gone through chapter 4 and chapter 5. Okay? So in chapter 4, we talked about Jesus talking in parables, and of course, he calmed the storm, right? And then in chapter 5, we saw where Jesus healed a possessed man of demons and drove the demons into the herd of pigs. Of course, I've heard of pigs. He healed a woman with a bleeding disorder after she touched his robe, and he raised a young girl from the dead by holding her hand and speaking to her. Now, what do these three things in chapter 5 have in common? Think. Let me help you. Possession, bleeding disorder, dead body. All three things are unclean. The rabbis of the day would not, and again, Jesus touched the hand. Jesus found the woman who was bleeding. Anything you do like that would make Jesus unclean, according to the rabbis. Okay? And unclean meant socially unacceptable, and you shouldn't even be, you should social distance. Okay? So, think of this as we wrap up. We're actually doing pretty good. I'm a little long. Are there socially unclean people that you know of? Like those people who, they go to their front yard and it's all covered in trash and they're partying wildly and stuff. Are you willing to talk to the diseased or possessed person who's in need of healing? That poor guy on the street who's looking for food, whatever. Are you willing to talk to them? Are you willing to push through the crowd to demonstrate your faith? Are you willing to throw out the laughers and the scoffers who make fun of your faith? Don't be afraid, just believe. Okay? I finally finished. Again, thank you for your time. I think Pastor Daryl's going to be talking next Wednesday, but then I think the next 2 Wednesday nights I'll be preaching, okay, and presenting. And I think I'm just going to follow on with Mark and just keep going, okay? Any questions? Any answers? Okay, I'm going to channel Groucho Marx. Any rags, any bones, any bottles today? We've been watching Turner Classic Movies,